What is up, YouTube? So right now I'm at these railroad tracks that are by my house, and this is episode 2 of Photography Basics. So what we're going to talk about today is composition. That's basically like the linear placement of your photos. That's like the basic term. There's actually so much that goes into composition. I like to think of it as making images lined up and, aesthetically pleasing. Sometimes, artistically you can do like a Dutch angle or many other things, but just to nail down the basics, we're going to talk about how to have really good composition, like all the time. It's a very basic technique, but we're going to talk about it. So I want you to remember the number 3 because we're going to talk about just threes in general. So first thing we're going to talk about is the rule of thirds. To make it simple, it's a 3x3 grid is how I like to picture it. So right now I'm like centered. However, if I were to move over a little bit this way, so how the rule of thirds works, there's a line here, a line there, and then 2 lines here and 2 lines. That's just how you line things up, so they're straight and they're linear, and you can basically compose your shots well. Alright, so the next thing to talk about is that there are 2 orientations, okay? This is what you call portrait, this way, and then this is landscape. So for a portrait photo, it would be like this. Landscape photo would be like that. So landscape, portrait. So for the rule of thirds, as far as that goes, most of my photos actually really depend on the the composition in my photos depend on the orientation. So if I'm shooting portrait, most of my portraits are centered. I just think it looks the best, and for basic just knowledge, I would just try to center most of your portraits. If you find an artistic opportunity to use the outer line and not have your portraits centered, then by all means go for it. But generally I'd like to keep my portraits nice and center. Landscape, however, I actually do like to keep my subject on one of the outer lines. Background and all that, it helps with that photo. So far we have the rule of thirds, remember that. The next thing I want to talk about, okay, so when you take a photo, there should be at least 3 layers. So you have the foreground, the background, and then the subject. But just to give you some perspective, you have your foreground, then your subject, and then your background. The reason that's important is because it adds just depth to your image. It also can add texture. You can play around with different textures. Like for example, the railroad tracks, it's like gritty, there's rocks, there's broken split wood, there's rusty metal, and then you have trees in the background, and then your subject is whatever your subject is. That's part of why I chose the railroad tracks for today's photo shoot. That being said, I don't have a model with me, so I brought some. I had some action figures from when I was a little kid. They're also really detailed and cool. So you have this guy, alright, and one of his buddies. And like I said, what the background does is it kind of sets the tone for your subject, or it's kind of to highlight where your subject is to show the environment, and your foreground is what can really give it depth and spice your photo up. So let's get to it.